Welcome back. I want to carry on with the basic concepts of environmental technology and discuss a key aspect that is related to what drives environmental technology is public health. And part of the areas that I will cover is communicable diseases, the types of communicable diseases, non-infectious diseases, and so forth. Communicable diseases are those that can be transmitted from person to person, commonly referred to as being infectious or contagious. Non-infectious diseases are not contagious. They cannot be transmitted from one person to another by any means. This type of non-infectious disease are associated with contaminated water, air, or food. The contaminants are usually toxic in the form as toxic chemicals, and they're originating mainly from industrial sources. But we can also get biological toxins generated from these sources that can cause disease. Communicable diseases. Typically, the communicable diseases are originated by microbes, and within this classification of microbes there are three general areas: bacteria, protozoa, and viruses. Many of the microbes that we find are essential components of our environment and relatively do not cause disease. The ones that cause disease are called pathogenic, or simply pathogens. There are many ways in which diseases can spread from one person to another. The modes of transmission of disease are summarized in the following drawing. On the far left, we have pathogens, and the drawing we also have the susceptible human contacts. Under direct transmission, such as a droplet or spray, which is within less than a meter, you can get direct transmission of a pathogen to a human. An indirect transmission can occur, let's say, airborne, vehicle-borne, or vector-borne to the human subject and cause disease. The airborne form of pathogens are carried on aerosols or dust. The vehicle-borne, and the vehicle that is transmitted of the pathogen is water, food, or milk, for example. A vector-borne pathogen usually rides on insects or animals. The way that environmental technology prevents the pathogens from interacting indirectly to human subjects is through water purification, wastewater treatment, air pollution controls, solid waste management, and overall general community sanitation. These modes of environmental technology help to prevent the indirect transmission of pathogens to human contacts. To summarize again, pathogens are transmitted either directly or indirectly. The direct modes of transmission, for example, is through direct contact, by touching, or through some type of droplet or spray, which could be a sneeze or just a person exhaling micro droplets, as in the case of COVID-19, and another individual target would be a person's respiratory system, where they breathe in the direct transmission from the other person that is infected with COVID-19, and therefore captures the COVID-19 disease. The indirect transmission of pathogens are airborne, vehicle-borne, or vector-borne. Again, airborne are through aerosols or dust. Vehicle-borne or through an ingestion of water or food or milk, for instance. And vector-borne or from insects such as a mosquito bite, West Nile virus, animals, rabies from bats and rabid animals. And again, to summarize, communicable diseases are spread in several ways, as mentioned before. Many of these communicable diseases can be controlled or intercepted by application of modern environmental technology. Let's focus again on the three general modes of indirect transmission. Let's look at vectors. Vectors of disease include insects, rodents, and other animals that can transport pathogens to susceptible human contacts. The animals that carry the pathogenic microbes are also called intermediate hosts. If the microbes have to develop and grow in the vector's body before becoming infective to humans, vector-borne disease can be controlled to some extent by proper sanitation measures. A vehicle of disease transmission is any non-living object or substance that is contaminated with pathogens. For example, the forks and spoons, handkerchiefs, and soiled clothes, or even children's toys are potential vehicles of transmission. They can physically transport and transfer the pathogens from carrier to contact. Water, food, and milk are also potential vehicles of disease transmission. These are perhaps the most significant with regard to environmental technology and sanitation. Water, in particular, plays a major role in the transmission of communicable diseases, but it is most amenable to engineering and technological controls. Water and wastewater treatment facilities effectively block the pathway of waterborne diseases. Now let's look at types of communicable diseases. Waterborne and foodborne diseases are perhaps the most preventable types of communicable diseases. The basic sanitary principles that are applied and environmental technology that is applied have virtually eliminated serious outbreaks of these types of diseases in technologically developed countries. Waterborne and foodborne diseases are also called intestinal diseases because they affect the intestinal tract of humans. These types of pathogens are excreted in the feces of infected people. If these pathogens are excreted in the feces of infected people, these pathogens are inadvertently ingested by others in contaminated food or water. The cycle of disease can continue, possibly in epidemic proportions. When the number of occurrences of a disease in a community is far above normal, that's what you have during epidemics. Symptoms of intestinal disease include diarrhea, vomiting, nausea, and fever. Intestinal diseases can incapacitate large numbers of people in an epidemic and sometimes result in the deaths of many infected individuals. Water contaminated with untreated sewage is generally the most common cause of this type of disease. The most prevalent waterborne diseases include typhoid fever, dysentery, cholera, infectious hepatitis, and gastroenteritis, basically known as diarrhea and cramps. These diseases can also be transmitted by contaminated food or milk products. Disease caused by bacterial toxins include botulism and staphylococcus food poisoning. Refrigeration, as well as proper cooking and sanitation at food processing facilities and in restaurants, are important for control of these foodborne diseases. Although cholera and dysentery have not generally been a problem in the United States, they are prevalent diseases in so-called third world countries. And basically, because of the undeveloped countries, they have these common diseases in those countries. In some of these countries, they are known to be endemic, which is basically means that it's habitually there. Let's look at typhoid fever. Until the beginning of the 1900s, typhoid mortality rates in some urban areas of the United States were as high as 650 deaths per 100,000 population. With the help of modern water purification technology, it helped to lower typhoid deaths to 1 in 100,000 per year. The combination of immunization and improvements in food and milk sanitation also played a role in reducing the incidence of typhoid. Amoebic dysentery, caused by a single-cell microscopic animal called an amoeba, occurred in epidemic proportions in Chicago during the early 1930s. About 100 of approximately 1,000 people who contracted the disease died from it. The cause of this epidemic was traced to sewage that contaminated the water supplies of 2 hotels in the city. Although epidemics of intestinal disease like this one are not at all common in the United States. When they do occur, they are usually very localized and can be traced to contaminated water supplies in hotels, restaurants, schools, or camps. Generally, the contamination is caused by cross connections in the water distribution system. These cross connections may allow backflow of wastewater into the drinking supply. Giardiasis and cryptosporidiosis are two waterborne diseases that can cause gastrointestinal disease and serious public health problems. They are both caused by single-celled microscopic animals called protozoa that can contaminate drinking water supplies. A very large outbreak of cryptosporidiosis occurred in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1993. The city water supply from Lake Michigan, an unusual combination of circumstances during a period of heavy rainfall and runoff, allowed the protozoan Cryptosporidium to pass through the water treatment plant. More than 40,000 people became ill, about 4,000 people were hospitalized, and more than 50 people died, and their deaths were attributed to this outbreak. During that 1993 outbreak in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the original source of contamination was uncertain. Since that incident, improved water quality standards and treatment rules make a repetition of this type of outbreak unlikely. Another type of communicable disease are from insect-borne situations. Insects that transmit disease from bites, and these bites can come from these diseases are transmitted from bites of mosquitoes, lice, and ticks. Malaria, yellow fever, and encephalitis are typical diseases spread by certain species of mosquitoes. Flies also transmit disease, but not by biting. The contact of their germ-laden bodies, wings, and legs with food consumed by humans spreads diseases such as typhoid fever and gastroenteritis. The elimination of the breeding places of insects. The elimination of breeding places of insects is one of the most important control measures possible. Proper garbage disposal reduces fly breeding places, and elimination of standing water is one of the methods available for eliminating mosquito breeding areas. Currently and in the past, chemicals have been used to control these breeding areas, and the use of insecticides were at many times the last resort. But the use of these chemicals also have contributed to other issues related to environmental, and other associated problems with toxic substances. In addition to insects, other vectors of disease transmission are vertebrate animals, such as dogs and rats. Rabies is a familiar example of a disease spread by the bite of an infected dog or the bite of some other mammal, but is not generally related to environmental conditions. Rodent-borne diseases such as typhus and bubonic plague are more readily controlled by applications of environmental technology. Rat populations can be controlled by good community sanitation practices. Rodent access to garbage and water should be prevented. Modern building codes include specifications for rodent-proof building construction. Now let's talk about non-infectious diseases. It is a well-documented fact that the overall death rate for people residing in heavily polluted urban areas is significantly higher than the mortality rate in areas that are relatively pollution-free. This is not necessarily because of the incidence of sewage pollution and the spread of infectious diseases. In fact, many of the current public health problems related to environmental pollution are considered to be the result of contamination of water, food, and air with toxic chemicals. The resulting diseases are non-infectious. Some of the non-infectious illnesses associated with toxic chemical pollution have a relatively sudden and severe onset, and the acute or immediate health effects can be readily traced to a specific contaminant. A group of substances known as heavy metals is particularly notorious in this regards. Other non-infectious diseases may take years to develop and can involve chronic or long-lasting health problems. Generally, various synthetic organic substances cause this type of problem, even in extremely small concentrations. Some organics are considered to be carcinogenic, which means they have the potential to cause cancer in humans. Now let's look at a substance that is known to cause non-infectious disease. The substance is the element lead, or Pb, known as plumbarium on the periodic table. Lead is one of the heavy metals involved in non-infectious diseases. The public health problems related to lead poisoning have long been associated primarily with ingestion by children of peeling lead-based paint. Lead poisoning can lead to blindness, kidney disease, and mental retardation, particularly in children. The evidence against lead as a dangerous environmental pollutant is overwhelming. It is a cumulative poison, that is, it accumulates in human tissue and can build up to toxic levels over time. As a result, environmental agencies in Europe and the United States have banned the use of lead additives, especially in gasoline. Another substance that is known to cause non-infectious disease is mercury. Mercury was first noted as such when it afflicted large numbers of people in Minamata Bay region of Japan in the 1950s. Mercury compounds discharged into the bay wastewater from a local factory were ingested by people who ate contaminated fish. A severe epidemic of disease resulting in blindness, paralysis, and many deaths was the result of the exposure to the mercury compounds. Less severe symptoms included hand tremors, irritability, and depression. One of the key features of this Minamata Bay mercury poisoning epidemic was that the mercury that was discharged into the bay was then consumed by microorganisms that caused the mercury to methylate or to have a CH3 molecule attached to it. That particular molecule or compound would then be ingested by other microscopic organisms called plankton, which later would find its way up the food chain to the larger fish and ultimately ingested by the people who ate the fish to become ill. This episode of mercury poisoning in Japan is one example of a relatively sudden and acute illness related to an environmental pollutant. The concentration of the methyl mercury was relatively high, and the harmful effects were noticed within a very short period of time. Another source of non-infectious diseases is from pesticides. An example of a pesticide is polychlorinated biphenyls, PCB. This is a substance that was widely used in electrical transformer fluids, coolants, paints, and other products. It persists in the environment because it is non-biodegradable, which means it just doesn't relatively break down under natural processes or attenuation. PCBs have been known to accumulate in the bottom deposits of rivers, and many species of fish are contaminated with them. Like the pesticide DDT, PCBs have been banned from manufacture and most uses in the United States. But because of these substances are extremely persistent in the environment, they remain potential dangers to public health for many years to come. Traces of DDT and PCB are still found in the body tissues of animals far removed from these substances sources. And both of these substances are known to be potential human carcinogens. The environmental pollution associated with these harmful substances and the resulting incidences of non-infectious disease are a big problem and generally referred to as hazardous waste and the problems associated with hazardous waste disposal, which is a major topic within environmental technology. One of the notable, highly publicized situation associated with hazardous waste disposal occurred in the 1970s at a place called Love Canal in Niagara Falls, New York. At that location, waste chemicals in steel drums were buried in an unused canal over a period of several years. The land was sold, and many homes were built on top of the site. Eventually, the chemicals leaked out of the drums into the soil, water, and air in the vicinity of the old dump site. Soon it was evidence that residents in the area of Love Canal were suffering from unusually high rates of cancer, miscarriage, birth defects, kidney disease, and other illnesses. The complex interrelationship of these chemicals and both heavy metals and organic, and the combination of their effects on humans are at times very difficult to determine which substance caused what disease, but the combination of all these substances can magnify the effects of the endpoint disease, such as cancer, immunological disease, and kidney disease, birth defects, miscarriages. Definitely a serious situation and is a big part of environmental technology. Air pollution also is another source of non-infectious diseases. Air pollution arising from stationary sources such as factory smokestacks or wood-burning stoves that had stacks, or indoor air pollution can cause bronchial asthma, bronchitis, and emphysema. Other sources of air pollution are mobile, such as the automobile or outdoor equipment causing particulate matter, all sorts of different sources that can occur from exposure to air pollution can cause health effects on individuals and also cause overall interrelated environmental effects, such as mentioned before with the example of the acid rain situation. It is difficult to prove a direct cause and effect relationship between a specific pollutant and illness associated with certain types of air pollution. But the overall negative effect of dirty air on public is obvious. The incidence of respiratory ailments and increased mortality rates are directly related to the severity of air pollution.